I'm Mike Govoni, and for the last 15 years, I've been in recovery from addiction and on the deepest quest to find healing, to experience my own unique wholeness beyond the story of what happened to me. By taking an integrative, holistic approach to experience transformation, I bring you the Healing Beyond Recovery podcast, a show dedicated to people in recovery who are looking for deeper healing and transformation. Welcome to another episode of the Healing Beyond Recovery podcast. I'm excited to bring you today's guest, Jeff Simone. By trade, Jeff is a doctor of pharmacy, but after having to overcome his own personal struggle with addiction, Jeff has been on a path to recovery and is now supporting others to do the same. Jeff is the founder of Reaction Recovery and is also an advanced dietary supplement advisor where he supports people in recovery through movement, nutrition, supplementation, including how to create regular routines, which he believes is essential for success in recovery. I want to warn you, we cover a lot of ground in this episode, including Jeff's personal story of addiction and the struggles he faced in early recovery to his current work as a dietary supplement advisor and some of his top supplement recommendations for battling opioid withdrawal to exercise and movement tips to create better mental health, as well as Jeff's 12 rules to recovery, in which he uses in his personal practice to support his clients in recovery to function optimally. Before we get to today's show, I want to make a quick disclosure. This podcast is for informational purposes only. Statements and views expressed on this podcast are not medical advice. Now that we got that out of the way, Jeff, welcome to the show. So, Jeff, I want to take a moment to thank you for being a guest on the Healing Beyond Recovery podcast. I've been following you for a little while on Instagram, and I love the work that you're doing in the world. I'm a huge fan of supplementation, daily routines, creating habitual practices that support my own particular recovery, my own, evolution on this process, on this path. And I really see what you're doing in the world and really appreciate it. So I just want to thank you for taking the time and sharing with our listeners.
Well, thanks, Mike. It's a pleasure to be on.
Yeah, and I know we had a little pre-recording podcast chat earlier, and you were talking to me specifically about some of the challenges you experienced in early recovery, and that, people have the idea that we put the substances down in our life just automatically becomes better. And you made a point to want to share that with me, and I want to share that with my listeners today in regards to, what was it like for you in early recovery? What do you want to share in regards to, life not getting better right away, and how did that lead you to where you are today?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great introduction. That really is the reason why I do what I do now. I think, we all know, that drug addiction has become epidemic, specifically the opioid epidemic, but really it's branching in all kinds of avenues. And that's even just the drug addictions, to say nothing of some of these process addictions that are exploding as well. But I think, so I think anytime that we have any kind of chronic condition with a very high incidence and horrible long-term success rates, okay, like we do with addiction, there's just going to be controversy, and there's going to be a lot of argument. And that's what you see in the recovery world a lot. And I understand where a lot of that stuff comes from, because this is something that affects so many people. And there really is no mainstream medical consensus in terms of like, what do we do with all these people? It's just sort of ravaging families, across the world. I focus mostly in this country. And I think that one of the biggest misconceptions right now is that this idea of if we separate people from these drugs, the problem, especially, okay, so let me talk about the opioids, for example. The problem is that the drugs are so darn addictive, right? Whether it's some of the prescription pain relievers, heroin, now it's moved into fentanyl, carfentanil. These products are so addictive, and it's so difficult to get somebody off it. The withdrawal symptoms are so severe, that if we were just able to successfully detox them, that these people would be fine. And I think that if there's anything that we've seen, if there's one thing that we've gotten really good at over the last just even 10 to 15 years, we've gotten very good at detoxing, at safely detoxing people. We're good at that. Western medicine has nailed it. We're getting people off. The problem is we're not keeping anybody off. And by anybody, I mean any kind of considerable number of people. So I think that the biggest myth is that once you separate people from those, quote, drugs of abuse, these highly addictive drugs, that their lives just start getting better and better and better. And it is a myth perpetuated across the whole continuum, so whether you're looking on social media, watching stuff on TV, in the magazines, anywhere where somebody is talking about sobriety or recovery, it seems almost like it's a necessary thing for somebody to go on there. So they say somebody's coming on, big name celebrities coming on to one of these talk shows, for example. The story, it is always the exact same interview, right? It is, oh my God, my life was so horrible. I was drinking, I was, using cocaine, whatever I was doing. And that was the old me. And now here I am. I haven't touched the drop in 3 months, and all my relationships are better, and I feel great, and I'm sleeping, and look at me. And it's like, that could not now, if you follow those same people, unfortunately, I'm trying not to make light of a very serious situation, but if you follow that particular example, it usually doesn't play out well long term, especially the ones where you're seeing the people with just a few months kind of in the very early stages that are talking about this. So I think that is why we as a society have this idea that once somebody gets sober, things just start getting wonderful. And that wasn't my personal experience. That pretty much anybody that I talk to in long-term recovery, that wasn't their experience. There is so much more. I mean, it's so much more than just ripping the drugs out of these people's hands. For a lot of people, like myself included, taking the drugs away can sometimes do nothing more than make life slowly so intolerable that you can hardly stand it. And yeah, I mean, that was certainly my experience.
Yeah, I like to say early recovery for me was like the analogy of taking a fish out of water and slapping it on land and saying, hey, learn how to live now. Like drugs and alcohol did everything for me. They did for me what I couldn't do for myself, especially regulate my nervous system in some capacity where I cannot feel that devastating hopelessness and lack of connection and loneliness. And when we talked earlier in regards to the pre-podcast recording, you shared a little bit about your personal journey and some of the difficulties, including suicidal thoughts. And I had those myself, even in early recovery and definitely before I got sober. So maybe if you care to share what it was like for you, because I think you're passionate in regards to this topic and how you struggled so deeply in your own life. And maybe we can talk to that in relationship to maybe supporting and helping someone who may be listening to this, who's, where we once were at one point.
Yeah. I can certainly share some of that. I was first introduced to recovery. I was sort of court ordered, to do a 90-day inpatient treatment center stint in 2013. So I'm a pharmacist. I was living in the Philadelphia area now. At the time, I was in Santa Monica. Okay, so I was out there. No, I didn't draw a sober opiate breath from age 20 to age 30. So like my entire 20s, I was chemically dependent. So I think that in some regards, my story is, it's a little bit different than some people. A lot of people have these addictions that kind of brew and feed over the years or over the decades. But a lot of people have little periods, maybe they get brought to detox treatment, maybe they just run out of drugs. They can't get them for a little bit. And then they're off for a couple of weeks and then back on. And then these kind of weekend binges. So in my story, it was a lot more in terms of the actual drug use. It was very consistent, because I had a unique type of access So in terms of like you said, suicidal thoughts before getting sober, I didn't have that. Yeah. I mean, I think that if they were there, they were never allowed to rise up to the surface, because I was constantly taking stuff. So just sort of all that stuff was just getting suppressed. So if that was there, I would have never known it, I guess is, kind of my point. Now, I had all types of sleeping problems, and I was just horrible nightmares for years. Okay. So, I mean, it was still getting through to me in all kinds of different ways. But for me, just mentally, I would say things didn't get really, really bad until I stopped. That was just kind of like my experience. You talking about like regulating the nervous system. Yeah, I mean, that is exactly what they do, regardless of what it is. I don't believe that any opiate addict specifically, does not have some type of freestanding endorphin deficiency. Whether that was, kind of usually it's some type of, developmental trauma, maybe like an acute incident that happened in your childhood, not being, tuned with our parenting caregiver, stuff like that. Something has happened so that, a lot of people, I believe, get attracted to that kind of stuff. But once those endorphins are kind of being fulfilled by the opiates for a long enough period of time, I think that you can really have the mirage of stability. I mean, it's amazing. As long as I can kind of keep that dose exactly where I want it, like I can really feel like things are not completely falling apart. So that was my experience. And I was out there, and eventually I kind of admitted to what I was doing to my employer. They had to contact the administrative court. I was, it was basically, like serious consequences, or you're going to do these 90 days inpatient. And I did that. And at this point, I had never detoxed. I had never fully experienced opiate withdrawal. I'd experienced maybe taking like a little bit less, and I knew what that felt like. But I was taking over 1,000 milligrams of oxycodone every day, and I had been doing that for a long period of time. Okay. Some people are familiar with the old OxyContin 80s. I was taking like the equivalent of 13 of those every day. And I had never. Yeah.
Oh my God.
That's where I got. And some people now that was not, and I was not passed out. Okay. This is not me like nodded out. I mean, I was working and I was working, I was performing well, and I was being acknowledged, and I was winning awards. I mean, this was just what had happened, for a long period of time. And then I was forced to, give that up. God, it was horrible. It was, I mean, it was as bad as I guess you could imagine that would be. And that was just the opiates. I mean, I was taking amphetamines every day, muscle relaxers, benzos, there was a lot that was in the mix. I focused on opiates because that was sort of my little coup de grace there. But there were a lot of things. Okay, so I did complete this 90-day. It was really under the thumb of some severe penalty, and I'm in there, because like you have to drug test a couple. It was almost every day for a little bit, and there's a guy standing right with you, and I'm in this little building, so like I have no access to anything. It was basically like a jail type setting. I don't use that word usually because I feel like that would be disrespectful to people who have detoxed in prison, for example, because it was certainly not that, but it felt like that. It felt like that to me at the time. It certainly felt like this is prison, and there's somebody waking me up. I can't get the stuff I want. They tell me this is when you can eat. This is when you get on the van to go to this place at this time, and you come home and you turn the light off. So it was as close to that experience as I've had. So I did that. I completed those 90 days. I was introduced to the 12-step groups. And I have a lot to say, about the 12-step groups if our conversation kind of goes that way. I don't believe that they're considered equal. Of course, even though it's all working off the same 12 steps and the same program literature, I have been exposed to that program in enough different states, in enough different cities to recognize that it is not all the same. It's a group of people, human beings are not considered equal. I can tell you that the recovery in West LA is strong. It is really, really strong. And although I didn't stay sober from my experience out there, yeah, I can't help but think that the way that I was introduced to a lot of this stuff from some of these guys who are really doing some incredible stuff out there, that is the reason that I'm able to be where I am today. I think that if I would have been introduced elsewhere, maybe, where all the focus is just on, put the plug in the jug and, don't pick up no matter what, all that kind of stuff. I think that is an unbelievably dangerous message overall, to people that are dealing with a lot of these kind of trauma histories. I think that in West LA, like, enough people are tuned into some of these other things that it can be like a launching pad, so it's not like this is all you have to do to start feeling better. I think, like a lot of these people kind of see it for what it is. Not everybody. And it could also kind of guide people to different avenues as well, so, so I was,
what was helpful?
Go ahead.
Curious, what was helpful from the LA group that really allowed you to build up sobriety? Because I come from Boston, and that's where they tell you to put the plug in the jug and shut up, put the cotton in your mouth and open your ears.
Well, Philadelphia too. In my area, it is that. It is very much that, just don't pick up even if your ass falls off, and if you don't drink, you're going to be fine, and all that stuff. And I understand that message. I'm really trying not to hate on that message. I've just seen it, really fail so many times, and kind of fail spectacularly. I've seen a lot of suicides in sobriety, just a lot of things. I know how myself. No, I think. One of the things is books, all these great teachers that I have been exposed to. I was introduced to them through like a lot of these 12-step guys. They all kinds of. David Hawkins was very, very big. For me in the beginning. David Hawkins, he wrote Power versus Force, Healing and Recovery. So many great books, and I read almost all of these. And I would have never been exposed to. Like, I didn't know anything about consciousness or just spirituality, like none of that stuff, So these people are kind of, and really once you start going down that path, it is so eye-opening and it's so enlightening that, that becomes addictive. I start to crave that. Like, I want to hear, what else is this guy talking about? Who else are these people, suggesting? I got into yoga from these guys, it's kind of brought somebody else out there got me into breath work. Now I'm going to tell you, so I'm kind of going on like an aside here, but I went to 2 breath work courses. This was actually kind of right in between, like when I was relapsing. So this was like 2014. And I had such a profound experience, and that was almost 7 years ago. And I've not done that since. And it's one of those things where I'm like, why did I had such a powerful response to that. The first time, okay, let me just tell you, I'll just tell you like my experience with that now that we're talking about it. So I was working with this guy, John Paul Karimi, he still does it. He's great. It was this big like auditorium, and they had you laying down, so it was with people. There was probably about 75 people in there. And, so he has you kind of doing these little breathing exercises where it's almost like you're doing like a cardio workout on the ground, so I'm kind of there and I'm breathing. And I'm doing all these little, and I was there with some other people that I knew, and I had this experience where all of a sudden I just started crying, and it was like now it was very loud, and there was loud music, and everybody was breathing very loud, so nobody could hear me. It was like everybody's like all the sounds got kind of muffled, but just like violent sobbing, and then afterwards, I'm talking to like some other people, like. Nobody else had that experience. And so I know that there was, now I didn't know at the time how a lot of this developmental trauma, different kinds of things gets, stuck in our body. And I didn't realize that crying is like a thing that people do, apparently. I'm just everything was so tight and so guarded, and this long into my sobriety. And then I probably went like another couple of years without crying, really. So, clearly there was so much healing that needed to be done. But that is one area, that I really want to find somebody around here that is doing that. Cause I think that the way that I hold on to stuff could really be impacted by something like that.
Yeah, and I think, you're bringing up a really good point. I love where this is headed. You got introduced to alternative people and teachers who were really engaging you in the spiritual dimension of things, not just, getting on your knees and asking for help, which is great. A lot of people stay sober that way, but you were actually taking the initiative to read the books, get into the details and actually show up for a breathwork class, which is amazing because as we know, the issues are in the tissues and the traumas get held in the soma, in the body. In breath work, right? Stanislav Grof was the founder of holotropic breath work. And his message was you can reach these deep states of consciousness that can be profoundly healing when you do certain types of breath work. His was holotropic, but there are many others that are very helpful. And I'm really glad you got to have that experience, Jeff. I too found breath work when I was sick as a dog and 9 years into recovery. So, we find it when we find it, but I think the message for the listeners is there's your path to recovery and there's other work you can do. There's your trauma work, there's your breath work, there's your spiritual work, there's your reading. I know you're a huge fan of books. So yeah, I'm glad you found that early. And yeah, the breath work is profound. You had a somatic release. Right. The reason why we're drinking a drug, it is because of that tightness, is because of that fear, is because of that shit that's held in this soma, in this mind body system. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was exactly my response. And a lot of this, like I said, so I didn't end up moving back to the East until around 2016. So a couple of those years, as I was kind of on and off drug use, it gets a little bit blurry, but so what happened to me, just even like my personal experience, I did my 3 months in this treatment center. I came out, I stayed sober on the outside for 2 more months. And then I just started getting like severely depressed, and I was just trying to do all this stuff. And I was trying to just go to a ton of meetings, and I was trying to be as honest as I could have been. And just all the things that they tell you, this is how you stay sober. This is how you kind of work through some of this stuff. And I didn't, and I got more and more depressed. There was a guy that I had met at the treatment center. Okay. This guy had relapsed. I had never been into heroin. I had access to prescription pills, so that is what I did. Now I didn't have access to that. They have, and it's all black tar out there. They don't have the stuff that I'm used to with the powders like on the East Coast. So it's, it's just messier, and you're dealing with, lighters and your tin foil and all kinds of, and I got into that. And, I ended up buying a gram of heroin, and it was an overdose attempt. It was a suicide attempt. I went in my car at night, and, it was not, I don't consider that moment a relapse, because I was not trying to quote use drugs. I was just trying to, I had not done anything for 5 months. So 1 gram of black tar heroin, and I was smoking it, should have been enough, I thought, to end it. And I ended up doing, so I tell that story once in a while now. And the way that I tell it, usually is either that was a spiritual experience, right? Where somebody or something or some energy was keeping me alive. Or, maybe I was just doing it wrong, right? It was my first time smoking this stuff. So maybe I was doing it wrong. And then I shared that one time, I think I had like a rehab or a detox. I was talking to some guys there. And then afterwards, somebody raised their hand. They said, yeah, or maybe you just bought some really crappy shit. And so, okay, fine. So it's one of those 3 things, it was God intervening on me. I wasn't doing it correctly, or I bought some really bad shit. And that kicked off about like a year and a half of like alternating heroin, methamphetamine addiction. And those, that next year was the darkest year of my life by far. It was just like an unbelievable year. And then, kind of somewhere in that, I guess, and then towards the end of that, I was kind of trying to get on and off and back into some of these meetings that I was going to, and hooking up with some of the guys that I had been exposed to. I guess during one of my better periods. My wife got pregnant for the first time. And then, but I was not working out there. I lost my license to practice in California. So then they really couldn't afford it. So and she was pregnant, so like there was a lot of urgency, and it was chaos. I mean, it was straight chaos is what it was. And then we ended up moving back here. And I got sober here, and I got sober here against my will, I guess. Again, I would say, at first, I mean, I had really no access to anything. I didn't really know anybody. It was a very, strange experience. I did feel like something was different. I did feel that. So I felt this time that I was, I didn't have this fantasy that things were just going to start getting great. I kind of went into it, thinking that things are just going to be really, really bad for a long period of time. And they kind of were. But I had the same sort of experience several months in this time, where again, I just started feeling suicidal. So that was, for me, I guess that's really where the urgency came in, where I started to try to learn about this other stuff, like the stuff that we're talking about now, for example, trauma, the drugs. All that I wanted to think about for 10 to 15 years was how bad the drugs were, how addictive they were. If I was able to separate myself from them, I would be fine. And I had to drop that belief, because it's just not true. I had like enough experience now to know that no, this is not what happens at all. When I stop for long enough, I start feeling suicidal, and I was really worried about that now, because my son was about to be born. All of a sudden, the thought of suicide wasn't quite as romantic, if I, to use that word, as it was before. Before I could kind of picture myself as this, as this shooting star that was burning out and going out in a Kurt Cobain flame of glory. That was maybe how I saw it in 2013. I didn't see it like that anymore. I saw it as there's this little guy who's going to be changed forever. And I say a lot of times, you've heard that you can't get sober for anybody. People say that you have to get sober for yourself. I certainly don't believe that. I believe that that you can only stay sober for yourself, right? But you can get sober for any number of reasons. And definitely what drove me through those first couple weeks, maybe those first couple months, was him. It was him. I mean, that is what allowed me to suffer like that. Okay. Without going back, was the thought of, if I just keep doing this long enough, things are going to get better. I don't know exactly how yet, but I do believe that things are going to get better.
Yeah, awesome. I'm glad. I totally agree with you that someone else can influence you to get sober. That they can help you do something that you weren't able to do, and the law can do that for people too, right? The court system, right? I've seen it plenty of times. So I'm glad your son had an impact in you choosing to want to put the drugs down. And let's fast forward a little bit. You're sober today. You're supporting others. I found you through another holistic psychiatrist type doctor, your buddy, Dr. Yee's name?
Joe Yee, yeah.
Yeah. And
follow him on social media too. He's a kick. It's Yee Joe MD is at Yee Joe MD is his handle. He's good.
Yeah, he's a funny guy, and his brand name is similar to mine. His is Beyond Recovery. And then he mentioned your name in a podcast or actually an Instagram Live rather. And I was like, what's this dude Jeff about? And then I found your page and I started, looking at you, and you're doing it. I think what you're doing is you're bringing your pharmacy skills and education and expertise into the world now of kind of holistic recovery, in a way of supplementation and routines and all that good stuff. So let's get into that a little bit. Let's talk to people that are struggling with that depression, right? What have you found to be beneficial? Supplements, lifestyle. Where do you want to go here? Let's get into that world.
Sure. Yes. So, that is what so I'm educated in pharmacy. I have a doctor of pharmacy degree. Okay. That's where my training was. So it's, very, very heavily Western medicine, of course. Uh, Even while I was practicing on the bench, okay, in the community practice setting, I always had this kind of itchy feeling that I'm doing more harm than I am good. Always, I've had that experience, and there are certain areas. So with the acute management of disease, I think that we're doing incredible. Like if you contract, a viral illness, or if you have an ear infection, we're way better today at treating that than we were 100 years ago, obviously, right? But in terms of managing chronic illness, I think that we're just headed down this path, and I have had the luxury to be able to follow people, so I, to dispense the same medication to somebody month after month after month after month, and you can watch these people, and certainly in the realm of mental illness, I saw many more people regressing than it looked like progressing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was always a feeling of mine. So, this time I went back and I got, certified as a dietary supplement advisor. So I kind of blend those two fields. I think that that there's so much that can be had in the field of supplementation, but it's a very, very difficult area to transverse on your own. If you just go online and start doing some Google searches, like there's a lot of money to be made too. So there's a lot of people that have supplement lines and that are good. I mean, these people are good, confident voices, and maybe they're skilled at marketing and advertising their products. So it is hard to tease out what is necessary, what's not necessary. And then a big part of it. Okay. So like where I come in for a lot of people in, especially, so most of the people that I work with are in what I consider early recovery. Okay. So I kind of start right after like the acute detox period. Okay. So right after somebody is sort of safely separated from their, chemical of abuse, usually, somebody less than 2 years sober. Okay. So most of the people are several months to a year and a half. And I'm working with folks, and there's a lot of people who can really, really benefit from supplements, but there are interactions, of course. And more people do take pharmaceuticals. Maybe they've been taking them long term, and there's a need to integrate those two. I mean, you can't. So like what some people will try to do is, and again, this is like where I come in. This is my place. They will do their own supplement research, right? And then independently, they will see their local psychiatrist or just their family practice physician, and they'll be taking their medications, and then they'll just start buying stuff and taking that separately, and kind of none the wiser, right? And then as problems come up, sometimes it's sort of hard to tease out what is causing some of the stuff. So I think that I try to position myself as saying, look, I have had this experience. I have witnessed, hundreds of people that have been able to improve their physiology in the beginning with changes in diet, nutrition, supplementation, stuff like that. But you have to do it safely. It's important that you can't just be starting and stopping, things on your own. There's a process, and there's a way to do this successfully. There are people that get better, from this stuff. So, so I just try to look and see, in terms of daily routine. Okay. Is that stuff in place? So I think, I guess in terms of say the timeline of recovery. Okay. Say somebody is getting sober when they're 30 years old. And then let's say that this person takes good care of themselves and they're going to live to be 85 years old. Okay. So there's now 55 more years of life in this theoretical example. Well, I see the recovery as kind of split up into two phases. The first phase might be like a year and a half long, and that is the acute recovery from the kind of physiological damage that has been done from some of these drugs. I mean, if you take opiates for 10 years, look, if somebody had no trauma, if you were in the quote unquote most ideal bubble of life, right? And then I just gave you opiates every day, every day, huge amounts, and I continue to increase them for 10 years, and then I just stop them. Well, you're going to have some problems. Right, exactly. You're going to have some issues there. So there is treating that part. And then after that, and I think this is, just people like you. Okay. I think once you can safely get to that point, well, now you have a chance to recover. Yeah, I think I use the word recover now, in terms of recovering all that stuff that was kind of there before time and kind of getting to the body, just like you're talking about, where I think people are doing like incredible stuff, but one of the problems is that a lot of people are not getting to that point, because somebody makes it to 4 months or 5 months or 6 months sober, and they have this idea that they should be feeling better than they are. Maybe they follow some people online, so-and-so quit drinking for 3 months and they're doing great.
So what is that first, like for someone that may be in their first year and a half of recovery, what is maybe an example? And I know there's, bio individuality, everyone's different, but maybe give me a brief, or give the listeners a brief little synopsis of a protocol, maybe a few key supplements, part of a routine. Just what does that look like in that early phase?
Yeah. I agree. It's going to depend upon what you were taking, how much, and for how long. Okay. If you're talking opiates and we're looking at like an endorphin deficiency, a physiological endorphin deficiency, then that has to get replaced early on, or else you will be so uncomfortable that it will be almost impossible to make it to the point where you can, really start to like fully recover.
So what does that look
like? There are supplements. What?
What does that look like?
What does that look like? Yeah. So one of my favorite supplements is a supplement called DLPA for endorphin. I'm not sure if you heard of DLPA. DL-phenylalanine is the amino acid.
Okay. Yeah.
It's very good. It is one of the only, so L-phenylalanine and D-phenylalanine. I usually recommend getting that both of those salt forms together. It's called DLPA. It is one of the few that we know is the immediate precursor to the endorphins. So getting that on board with people, there's a couple of contraindications if you have long-term uncontrolled hypertension. So if your blood pressure is through the roof and that's not being controlled, then I would not recommend it. But for the majority of people that I deal with, this is a very, very safe supplement. High dose, you can kind of push this pretty strong, at first. And there are cofactors to making DLPA, so getting the B vitamins on board, vitamin C, high dose vitamin C in the beginning, up until the point of diarrhea, is a side effect that some people know about with vitamin C. That just means that you're now taking more than your body can absorb. So that's the point that you would back off. So it's not problematic. You just, okay, I don't go any higher than that now. But you need, the body can, it is unbelievable, somebody in early recovery, how much vitamin C they can handle versus somebody, who once your body really starts to get healed, it can't handle nearly as much vitamin C. So that is kind of one marker of how much work needs to be done, right? So there are a few cofactors that added to the DLPA, and then getting your body moving. So DLPA is what is going to give the body the ingredient that it needs to make endorphins, and then some type of exercise is going to be the signal to release it. Okay, so I always tell people that you need to do those things together. You can't just sit back and take DLPA and think that it's all the endorphin magic is just it's not. You're not taking a Percocet here. You're taking the precursor to it, the precursor to the endorphin, but you have to tell your body to release it. And some type of exercise, that combination in the beginning, whether you feel like doing that or not. And the exercise can be, it can be jogging in place for 5 minutes, if that's all that your body can handle in the very beginning. If you're physically sick, most people get, they start to heal up quickly enough that you can do a little bit more than that. But you're asked for an example. That is one of the examples with the opiates. Do it early, do it often, and it works.
Yeah, great. And going back earlier in our conversation, you talked about endorphins and opiates, and there has to be some sort of correlation of lack of endorphins, whatever it may be, for someone to be taking a substance and feeling good, getting some sort of result like opiates. And I know there's some research done that the affection you receive from a mother's love and opiates go along the same pathway, more or less. And it was kind of telling for me. I was taken away from my mom at 3 years old, and yet when I did OxyContins for the first time, it was like unbelievable. It was like I got that rush, and yes, coming off of a $500 a day opiate habit myself, not quite as high as yours. We can play who had a
high enough.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we can play who had a better opiate habit if you want. But it looks like you took the cup on that.
I'm going to win that game. You need to play a different game than that.
You had the advantage there of had unlimited amount at your fingertips. But early in sobriety, 30 days into coming off of opiates, that was the worst thing for me. So I wish I had that type of advice early on in sobriety. But I can say, fast forward, when I was healing 9 years in recovery from a brain type injury of some sort, it's still up in the air exactly what was going on there. But I began to exercise every morning with taking supplements. I would exercise at max heart rate to get what's called brain drive neurotropic factor going. And I thought that changed, that made a huge difference. So I'm not sure if you need to exercise so strenuous, or you can just do soft exercise or mild exercise as well. What's your thoughts with the DLPA and exercise?
That's a great question. I wish that we had better long-term, clinical literature to really support some of these differences. Because I think about this stuff all the time. So I'll give you kind of some of my anecdotal experience and some of my own theories. So again, this is not. I don't know of any good, research article that has looked at opiate addiction, strenuous exercise versus, maybe more mild, longer exercise. I did the strenuous exercise. I still do. Strenuous, same thing. I actually got this watch, kind of pretty early on. So like before that, I didn't monitor heart rate or anything like that. But once I started to do it, I kind of fell into that kind of thing where same thing as you. I wanted that heart rate to be elevated, and I wanted to be elevated, for a long enough period of time, and not to the point that I'm passing out, but to the point that I feel like I am pushing my body to release as much of this stuff as possible. And I started to look at it, almost like it was prescribed, almost like this is you're prescribing me an antidepressant here. And what you're writing on the pad is engage in strenuous activity every day. And I did it like that, I did it as if, sort of that religiously. And I do believe, so I still do a lot of strength training. I do a lot with weights. And you can really get your heart rate up for long periods of time if you do that correctly. If your intervals if you're waiting 10 minutes in between sets, you're not going to. But if your intervals of training are tight enough, you can keep your heart rate up for long periods of time. I think that coupled with the nutrients, the amino acids, I think that's really the moneymaker right there.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, there's so much you can do to support, your life and recovery and support you to feel better. It just requires a lot of dedication. And like you say, you're still doing it. I'm still doing it, right? My routine, I posted it today. I woke up, I had a glass of lemon water, right? I read my book for 30 minutes. I meditated, I exercised. Usually I do a far infrared sauna, but today I didn't. It's like I stick with these every day. It's like this is my prescription. And I love the way you're looking at things from your history of being a pharmacist to now prescribing yourself, other, regimens in lifestyle things that are really making a huge difference, right? I healed from chronic debilitating illness, which I share with the listeners all the time. I didn't do it by sitting on my ass and taking the pharmaceutical that almost destroyed my liver. I changed my diet. I shifted my consciousness. I did a fecal microbiota transplant. I stress reduction. It's like, this is what it's about. So that's why I love your work so much, Jeff. And let's talk about maybe your your 12 rules to recovery, I know that you are a big component of when helping people create that, routine and so forth.
Yeah. I'll kind of talk to them, specifically, individually in a second. I want to talk to, I think that we're on the same page, in terms of, I think that a regular, consistent routine, that is the answer to long-term, stable. I mean, I use the word recovery, but you could just say long-term stable health, and even getting away from that vortex of the cycle of like Western medicine. I think that that's the only way to do it. Yeah, the only way to do it is to kind of reorchestrate your life and put these little pieces in place. So I was prescribed an antidepressant, right after I was first brought into treatment. So like around like 8 years ago. And I was doing that for a while, and I had all kinds of side effects from it. And plus the fact that I just knew that this is just not something, and I'm usually like a little bit hesitant to talk about that experience so much, just because I know that so many people do take these medications and they're prescribed to them, so I think that there might be, that there certainly is a time and a place for certain things, but the way that we do it, with just getting people on something indefinitely, that is not the way that this stuff was originally created. It was originally created as kind of like a short, just to maybe snap somebody out of like a suicidal depression, for example, as a way to kind of get somebody through like a real tough season of their life. We've moved now into, you are chemically insufficient and you need this stuff for the rest of your life. And I think it's like, oh my God, like how can this, like in 2020, how is this the mainstream direction? So like the fact that I don't take any prescription medications and
hold on. Can I say you ask yourself, how can this be the mainstream direction? One word: money.
Money. Yeah. I mean, you're right. If there was no monetary gain to be had by these drugs, I think that, we'd stop selling them instantly.
For sure.
That is true.
Yeah. The procedure that I did to get to get irritable bowel under control, right? They only do it for one condition, which is C. diff, Clostridium difficile, because there's no money in people's poop quite yet, right? Yeah. And it's like the drug I was on was like $20,000 a month. So anyway, sorry to interrupt your train of thought, but yeah, it's money.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. So, kind of coming from somebody who was taking just the number of pills that I was taking, that was, not prescribed, but I was just taking them for so long. And I really believe that I would never be on the other side of that. The fact that I wake up, I go to sleep without, I don't take anything, I just I lay down and I sleep and I wake up 8 hours later, and it's a bloody miracle is what it is, for somebody who, the very, very least I would be taking Benadryl or NyQuil or something to knock myself out, and that was before I even started with my horrible drug addiction. So, the idea that somebody like me, after all those years, can live the way that I live now, that is the enthusiasm for me to be doing what I'm doing and talking about it. And the reason, that I will share, so I told you how much of the oxycodone I was taking. I will use that number once in a while because what I hear from a lot of people, especially a lot of the opiate folks, is they believe that they've just done too much long-term damage to themselves, and they've changed their brains, and they will never be able to not have to take something, maybe like the replacement opioid or something else. So I use that just as an example of you can get through that. You can, it's not easy, and you have to do a lot of things. Like I said, you have to attack this like this is a prescription and you're religiously following it. But if you do that, I think that things can get a lot better. So my 12 daily rules for recovery that I kind of wrote them out as this is my backbone. This is kind of the frame of what I see works for most people. If you can kind of put this stuff in place and sort of attack them, kind of like it's a checklist. I've seen a lot of people recover and start doing good things. And I walk through them mostly chronologically. One, like my first rule is the only one that's not. It is connect with the local fellowship, and I say connect with a fellowship of people, meaning you have to do this with people. So it's people that are on your same journey. I mean, if you're into this, be around people that are into that and that are kind of moving you through that, especially in the beginning. Like if you just think you can just, muscle through it in your basement by yourself, by, just exercising and eating right, for example, it's a losing effort. It's just too hard. That you need to be connected with other people. I think that we're in a good place now that so much is available virtually, and you can connect with so many people so quickly online too, that there's all kinds of other ways to do it that weren't available before. So in that respect, we're fortunate. We're more fortunate now than maybe we were 20 years ago. But you have to connect with some people. My rule 2, I say wake up at the same time every day. I think that it's really important. Just in terms of like circadian rhythm, melatonin production, serotonin production. We know that all that stuff is related to. It is more related to what time you wake up actually than it is what time you go to sleep. I've found that going to sleep, just kind of works itself out. As long as you're waking up at that same time every day, then you're avoiding the trappings of always trying to play catch up. Yeah. Taking naps during the day because you only got 4 hours. So for example, once in a while, I used to have sleep problems all the time. I was never sleeping through the night. Now, it just happens very infrequently. But when it happens, okay, so if I get woken up, say I'm woken up at like 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm pretty wide awake. Before I would be, almost fighting my body to try to make myself fall back asleep. I'd be looking at the clock, getting mad. Now, if I'm up, I just go outside the room. I turn the light on. I read a book, and if my body falls back asleep, it does. But if it doesn't, then I'm just up, because I know that I'm gonna go. That my body will become tired enough the next day that I will get back onto back into my routine. I don't even think twice about that. Like I don't get mad. I don't think like, oh, now I'm going to be tired all day. None of that. It's just, that's what happened on February 4th. I woke up at 3 o'clock. Who cares? So that's a big part of that routine, that has really been helpful to me. So I'm going to jump actually kind of really quick. I want to bring up one that I get a lot of questions on. It's the one that's the least self-evident. So my rule 11 is floss. Okay, floss every day.
I saw that one and I loved it. Go ahead. I want to comment on this too.
Yeah, you kind of have to read about it, like on the little blog a little bit, because it's like I said, the other ones are pretty obvious. I like to use the analogy that recovery is like flossing. It's a daily behavior that I wouldn't characterize as fun. Okay, it's not sexy or glamorous, but there's no question that it's the right thing to do. No one ever argues with you that you shouldn't floss. When it becomes a regular part of your life, it's really not too inconvenient. But if you go a while without doing it, when you start back up, it might bleed and hurt a little bit. So that is where the whole kind of flossing idea, I use that as my barometer, as my daily barometer for, am I doing the little things that I know are going to help me long-term that might not be the most fun for me right now. So I thought about that one for a while. I thought like, what is like a daily, like what could be my daily yardstick? Something that I can look at that like, if I'm not doing this, then I can recognize that like all my other stuff, might be kind of, falling apart also. And the thing that I settled on was floss, because it takes 30 seconds to do it. It's super cheap. It is, it's one of the few recommendations that throughout my life hasn't changed, right? Like when I was 5 years old, they were saying, floss, it's a good thing for you. 30 years later, they're saying floss, it's a good thing for you. It's like hardly anything else there has been 3 decades worth of consensus, right? It's like everything else has changed. You know, they used to say, do this. Now they say, don't do that. They used to say, you know, eggs are bad for you. Now, no, eggs are fine. And kind of all these, you know, milk, same thing. Remember, like when we were younger, it was just, you know, milk is going to turn you into, you know, and then it's like, oh, wait a minute, maybe we were a little, so it's so many things change. I like floss because it has stayed consistent.
Yeah, I saw that on your site, and I chuckled when I saw it for a couple of reasons. I think your analogy in comparison to recovery is great. I mean, it's like you constantly are you know, keeping up with your oral hygiene. It's something you do that's small. It's something that, you know, gets the old, you know, breakfast out of your teeth and allows you for something new to come in. It allows you to have a good smile. There are more repercussions if you don't do the small little thing when it comes to flossing. You'll have bad breath, you'll have tooth decay, and there's a lot of science linked to neurological problems with specific oral bacteria. So that's awesome. And I just wanted to put
cardiovascular too, yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to put a plug in. It's so funny, as wasted as I was when I was, you know, using, I would always, 3 a.m, I would always floss my teeth, because for me, teeth are important to me. And don't get me wrong, things happen in recovery where we use substances and they rot out our teeth, and it's you know, can come with shame. I'm not here to shame anyone, and I understand that. From my own particular situation, my teeth are important to me. I already had I had my mother's, you know, side of the family's teeth. They were kind of weak. They weren't, you know, I got cavities easy. So I knew if I didn't keep up with them that, you know, bad shit was going to happen. So I love the fact you say floss your teeth, and it's great.
That's funny. I actually had the same experience with that. You know, even at my very worst, everything else was falling apart. Like my entire body was falling apart. There were times, you know, it's like when I was using meth and I would be up for like 3 days straight or 4 days straight. And I was sleeping downstairs in this big garage, like in my car. It was horrible. But I would go over to the dumpster with my toothbrush, and I would, you know, just completely in like a meth psychosis almost. And I would brush my teeth, and I would floss. And same exact thing. That was, I mean, if anybody saw that, you know, that would have been stranger than anything else that you do. It's like, okay, you know, he's just on drugs, and that's why he's acting like he's on drugs. But taking care of, yeah, you know, that is funny that you brought that up. I don't think that I've ever heard anybody else, you know, say that was their line. You know, you can take everything else from me, but God damn it, my teeth are not going to rot away from decay.
For real, I'm with you, brother. And it's, you know, what's funny about that is I think that part of us deep down in our being that wanted those healthy teeth, that is the part of us that I think has risen to the top and been able to come through. If you can almost follow me, right? There's that part of us that always wanted to, you know, not lose that pearly white smile, to have healthy teeth, to do something good, even in the midst of this big shitstorm of using drugs. You were back there behind the dumpster, you know, flossing and brushing your teeth, and I was up at 3 a.m. just giving them a quick floss before I passed out. It's interesting, but I appreciate that similarity, Jeff.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll kind of run down them in a second. You know, but I was just thinking of something as you were saying that, and I want to make sure that I kind of put this in, because I want to hear your take on this as well. Somebody was talking about you know, stigmas around addiction recently, and I want to kind of give like my 2 cents real quick, and I just want to hear what you have to say about it. So I believe that the reason that stigmas around addictions persist is because subclinical addictions, okay, like ones that aren't bad enough to maybe like, you know, to require intervention, are so common, and they're so often denied, you know, by the sufferer, that their disdain for themselves gets kind of repressed and then projected onto the person, you know, with the more severe addiction. I think Carl Jung calls that the shadow, right? The part of ourselves that we can't integrate, but we hate nonetheless, you know, so we attack it and brutalize it in that other person. So, I mean, I think that until the world really starts doing its own shadow work, I don't see that changing.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, Jeff. I think that's great. It's like this. It's like when you see something you don't like in someone else, right? That possibly we're struggling with that, or that part still lies within us. And yeah, I totally agree. And if everyone did their own shadow work, man, this place would be a lot different.
Yeah. Okay. I know that we're kind of going like a little long, right? Yeah. That tends to happen, but here, let me go through and then stop me, if you want me to elaborate. So rule 3, I say, set aside 10 to 15 minutes of morning quiet time. Very, very important. I think you touched on it, just get into some kind of routine in the morning. Rule 4 is eat breakfast. I could talk a whole podcast just on the importance of specific nutrition. I think breakfast is unbelievably important to so many people that are in recovery, especially from drug and alcohol addictions, have blood sugar issues. They're unbelievably common. And the easiest way to kind of stop that blood sugar roller coaster is to load yourself up in the morning, high proteins, high quality fats, fibers, just, things that are long-term nourishing and that they're satiating, and to kind of, keep that on board for longer. There are people I know, that have been recovered for longer periods of time that get into, some other stuff, maybe some, some intermittent fasting kinds of things. But I think somebody in their very early stages that what they will usually do is just, coffee and a donut or something, or coffee and a bowl of Frosted Flakes. And that just creates this. And as the blood sugar is moving like that, your mood fluctuations are going to be it's going to be so labile that it's very, very hard to know, what is a drug craving, what is an alcohol craving versus what is just a sugar craving, because, I'm in a hypoglycemic state. So I think it's so important, and I see it all the time.
I love that, Jeff. I love that. In fact, I don't know if there's any science to back it up, but my hypothesis is that people who struggle with alcohol have some sort of inability to break down and process sugar properly. I mean, alcohol is sugar. I don't know if there's clinical data to back that, but I'm saying a lot of people, and a pattern I've recognized with a lot of clients, is we're really sensitive to sugar. So I think that's super important advice. Now, I came to the conclusion one time, you may appreciate this, I created a little meme on Instagram about it, was, you hear the terminology HALT, HALT in early sobriety or in 12-step, right? Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And I say, when you learn to take care of yourself in that state, you'll no longer be lonely. But when you think of HALT, always think of blood sugar. Where is my blood sugar? Right? And balancing your blood sugar is so important. So yes, early in recovery, eat breakfast. Like you said, high quality fats are so important. And later on, maybe you get into it, intermittent fasting or keto, or, a flexible, metabolism, but, or being fat adaptive. But in early recovery, for sure, load up, regulate that blood sugar and take care of yourself. I love that.
Yeah. Those are those 3 big things. No major diet changes. Don't after a 15-year alcohol addiction, don't become plant-based on day 2 of sobriety. Nothing major like that. Stick to the basics. My basics are, my 3 basics are going to be: limit the refined processed sugars, high fiber, high protein with every meal and snack, and then eat something every 2 to 3 hours to prevent or at least lessen that blood sugar roller coaster. And if you do that, you will find that your anxiety comes down, your heart rate is not speeding on you, your thoughts are going to be clearer, your words are going to be sharper, your ideas are going to be more focused. All that stuff is all related. If your blood sugar bottoms out, it is very hard to live successfully in that day. And if you're just playing that game all day long, and the thing is, when it bottoms out, it's like, what does your body crave? Is it craving broccoli? And no, of course not. It is craving a Three Musketeers bar. It's craving something to bring it back up really quick. That is what's going to work for you. So the name of the game is not to resist the craving once it happens. The name of the game is to prevent them from happening. And the way to do that is these highly nourishing. There's some supplements that do it. Glutamine is a really, really good supplement. I still take glutamine off and on once in a while, but I took that a lot in early sobriety. Whether it's powder, or you can even open up the capsule and kind of put something under your tongue and let it dissolve. Glutamine is a great product to regulate like a lot of those cravings. But this stuff, it is so important. It's not like you're not doing it, for your cardiovascular health. You're not quote eating well so that you reduce the risk of heart attack. You are trying to reduce the cravings so that you don't relapse tomorrow. That's the idea. I mean, if there's one thing that we know is more highly correlated to relapse than anything else, it is stress. Psychological and internal, and psychological and physiological stress. We know that. That there is consensus there. So everything that we're doing is trying to regulate the stress. I think you're talking about more of the nervous system stress, which I think is the long-term answer. I'm talking about in that very early period, that physiological stress. And when your blood sugar is going like that and your cortisol is just firing and the epinephrine is coming nonstop, it is very, very hard for your life to resemble anything like stability.
Love it. Love that.
Rule 5 is establish a supplement regimen. We talked about that. A little bit, connect with somebody who's knowledgeable in this area. Like I said, it's very hard to do it on your own successfully. Also just to limit how much money you're spending. I mean, you can go online and just buy all kinds of things that you don't need and spend way more money. That is all significant too. I think it's very important to be constantly adjusting it too. There's never been a time that I have not been taking some kind of supplement. But I will tell you that I every 3 months, every 3 months, my supplement, if I open up my cupboard right now for you, it looks completely different because it is always changing. Like the idea is that you're supplementing, so as you're able to fill in different gaps with your life, with your nutrition, with your diet, hopefully, you don't need to lean on certain things quite as much. And then you can go down this path and then, you can kind of move it and then go down and start to reduce the dose of a lot of things. But, a lot of people come to me who are, a lot of people don't want to go on, these psychotropics, the prescription antidepressants. A lot of people are coming off of them. I know the literature and I've been through this myself. It's something that I know is even though it's, it's one of those areas that a lot of people just don't like to talk about it, because you just get wrecked, like online, for example, anybody who even touches on the antidepressants, you're going to get attacked to some degree, by people. Oh no, and then everybody, they will tell you some specific story. My sister stopped taking these and then this happened and she became very depressed. And, so I don't argue with anybody about that stuff. All that I say is if you don't want to go that route, there are ways to do it. There are, safe and successful ways to do it. Rule 6 is move your body every day, exercise every day, do something where you intentionally get your heart rate up. And I think that, that can look different for everybody. I've said before, the exercise that you should do is the one that you'll do, the one that you'll actually do. That's the right one for you. Rule 7 is be engaged in a good book. Okay. When I was first getting sober, I was reading a book a week for probably about 2 years. And I have them all still, right next to and it has completely changed my recovery. I cite that as being as impactful as any of these other things, just these great teachers that I've been introduced to.
Give me your top 3 favorite books, recovery, non-recovery, that you've loved so far.
If you ask me that question next week, or if you asked me it the week before that, it changes all the time.
Yeah. So November 30th, 2020. What do you got?
November 30th. Oh God, picking 3 is so hard. I just talked about Man's Search for Meaning on a podcast last week. Viktor Frankl. It's an incredible book. It's not it's not an addiction recovery book, but it's so, so good. In terms of addiction recovery, I think everybody should read In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts by Govoni. Unbelievable book. I mean, that book really changed the way that I looked at addiction. And then I got very into him. I mean, he is an incredible voice in terms of, developmental trauma, how like a lot of these like repressed emotions, unresolved traumas can lead to chronic illness. Like I think, like you were talking about. Yep, so he wrote a book.
When the Body Says No, I think.
When the Body Says No. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome book. He wrote Scattered, really, really good book on ADHD. And he gets into like developmental trauma with that. Book, Hold On to Your Kids with Gordon Neufeld, talking about, parental attunement and just that like attachment dynamic and how if that is severed, it will lead to, it doesn't always lead to drug addiction. Like it might, play out in, maybe chronic disease, maybe autoimmune disease, like you're talking about, how like a lot of that stuff, if you just kind of keep suppressing and don't actually get to the root cause, it will, I guess like his point is that it will play out somehow. It's going to play out in what we will call disease. I mentioned David Hawkins' Power versus Force. Have you read that?
It's actually on the list. I was just talking about it. There's a lot of David Hawkins fans out here because he used to live in Sedona, and that's where I currently am. Yeah, but I haven't read that. I read The Pathway of Surrender.
By him? Is that?
Yeah. It's a yellow one.
Okay. He has about 15. I feel like I read most of them, but not, and they're all pretty hefty books. Yeah, Power versus Force is kind of like, that is like the quintessential one that really summarizes, some of them build on themselves and some of the books, if you have not read Power versus Force, it's very, very hard to follow. Just kind of his whole process, how he has a calibration of consciousness, so he talks about just basically from shame, okay, from kind of like suicidality is 0, shame is around 10 to 20, all the way up to full enlightenment is 1,000. Okay. So he says there's only been a couple, like the Buddha and Jesus Christ and maybe 4 or 5 people like of all time that he kind of puts at that 1,000 level. And then all of us are falling somewhere else. Drug addictions are we're at about like 100. And that's the level of desire, so that's the same thing that Govoni was talking about in the realm of hungry ghosts is a reference to that Buddhist realm. The hungry ghost realm is it's these monsters with these big bellies and long skinny necks, and they can keep putting stuff into their mouth, but they can never actually get full. So that's that same idea that David Hawkins is talking about with it being stuck in this place of craving and desire, and that does not stop just by getting sober from a particular drug. I mean, you will fill that with something else. If you're not doing this thing, you're going to fill it with something, whatever that is, shopping or gambling or pornography or, the highly processed sugars is a big one, more so for the women, but like a lot more with the men that I've been seeing recently. It's very, very common, because it works. I mean, that stuff works. It provides these little short-term endorphin hits, short-term dopamine hits, and it's satisfying something there. So, and also like your life doesn't fall apart quite as quickly. If you're a full-blown methamphetamine addict versus a, pornography addict, it's going to look different. It's going to play out differently. So, a lot of times those ones go on for a little bit longer. So how many is that? Did I name 3? I think so.
Yeah. We got a few in there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think you and I were talking about like Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. Peter Levine's Chasing the Tiger. Is that it? Yeah. Chasing the Tiger.
Mm-hmm.
So good. Really, really good books. Something else that I did in the beginning, I'll kind of say this as an aside, is I didn't read all, maybe spirituality or books that you would find in like a self-help genre. I actually went back and I reread like a lot of those high school books. Remember like the books that they would make you read in high school? I bought some of those books and I started going back and forth, just something like lighter, books that I knew were kind of considered classics, but like my maybe first 6 months, I wasn't able to do the real heavy stuff all the time. So I was kind of doing like every other, where like I would just read, something else that that was like recommended to me. I read, The Catcher in the Rye, for example. Okay. So I'm going back and forth into things that are just to get me back into that reading mode. And that worked. I think sometimes like when I try to suggest too many of the books that I love now to people, what I found is that, it can turn some people off. I don't know if you've had that experience.
Yeah, well, it's deep. I mean, the books that we're talking about, Body Keeps the Score, Peter Levine's work, David Hawkins' work. I mean, these are deep books. But yeah, nonetheless, I loved how you went back to reading some of your high school books to kind of warm up those pathways. And It's not a bad idea. There's probably a couple I could go back and check out myself.
Some of those are good too. It is completely different as a 30-something-year-old versus as a 16-year-old. It's like you're reading a completely different book. My rule 8 is carefully select the information that you consume. Again, this is like another thing I could talk a whole podcast just on this. My point is that everything that we consume, information, it's all significant, and it all will have like an impact on us. I talked about a lot this year. A lot of people were just overdosing on news, and they were getting sick. I mean, if you're just sitting around watching the mainstream news this year, there is no way. I don't care how stable you were. There's no way that did not start to affect you. So I really caution people. Don't do that. Don't do that. That is not helpful. And the same thing goes with the voices that you surround yourself with, the people that you listen to, the podcasts you're listening to, the YouTube lectures, whatever you're doing. I mean, I'm not a big TV guy, but if you're binging Netflix and you're watching different series, be careful. Be careful what you're selecting, because all that stuff is getting absorbed in ways that you're probably not aware of.
Yeah, I think that's some solid advice, especially in this time we're in right now, is really being selective of what information you're allowing to get into your brain, because ideally the subconscious holds a lot of it, and we wind up believing things and hearing messages and that really make a difference in our lives, when in reality, we don't need to be driven by that. A lot of the fear tactics and other things that are out there, so yeah, that's solid. Completely agree.
So my rule 9 is to stop making things worse before you start making them better. Okay. So that's just like the idea of like these things that are immediately killing you right now. If you can stop those things, be easy on yourself. You don't have to become the Buddha after 1 month sober. You don't have to go online and post about how incredibly wonderful everything is. And my relationship with my mom has all of a sudden, 30-year history, and it's become perfect. And my relationship with my cat is the best it's ever been. And it's like, well, okay, just maybe pump the brakes on some of that stuff. Just stop making things worse. You'll have time for some of that other stuff. My rule 10 is to clean your room. Okay. I think that there is a component of personal responsibility that goes along with recovery. I don't think that it should all be that. I think that the 12 steps, for example, go too far. I think it is too far in the, because people that their bodies are kind of reacting in a certain way, and if they've learned to become like ashamed sort of how their bodies respond to things, and then there can be a lot of guilt around not taking personal responsibility. So I do think that it needs to be coupled with full body healing. But your room is a good example. It's something that's yours. Nobody else is involved in that. What happens outside your house, even what happens in the rest of your house, just wall off that tiny little space, make your bed every morning, keep your room clean, keep it so that when you walk into that room, you feel good. That when you go to sleep, you feel like you're not sleeping in chaos, and you're not waking up to chaos. Everything is folded and put away where it's supposed to be. I think that kind of stuff can go a long way. Rule 11, I talked about the floss, and then rule 12, I just say, keep going. Basically, this is the Winston Churchill quote. If you're going through hell, keep going. It's a long journey. It is not going to be linear. It's not like day 14 is better than day 13 is better than it's going to go like this. You're going to have 2 great weeks and you're going to feel like I've got this under control. And then you're going to be horribly depressed for 3 days. And then you're going to feel good for 2 days and then really bad for 12 hours. And it's going to go like that for a while. And I guess my point is, regardless of where you finish that day, if you're still committing to this path, great job, keep going. So that's the Cliff Notes version of the 12 rules for recovery. Awesome,
Jeff. I really appreciate those steps and really appreciate the work that you're bringing to the world. Now, as we wrap up here, why don't we tell the audience where they can find you, where they can find your services, and maybe your social media handles.
Yeah, so you can find me online. So my website is www.reactionrecovery.com, REACTION, recovery.com. My email's on there. I have my phone numbers on there as well. Yeah, I'm pretty active on social media. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and that's at Reaction Recovery. Yeah, I post a lot of videos. I'll just think of some topic throughout the day, and then I'll walk up into this office at night, and I'll kind of set my little tripod up and press play and see where it goes. I just got into social media not too long ago, about like a year ago, and it's a pretty cool experience. You can meet all kinds of great people, and I'm I kind of scoffed at it before, but no, I think it's really cool. Yeah, like I met you on here, for example. Like there's all kinds of people that I would otherwise have never been introduced to, that I've been able to meet through that. So I am active there. Send me a DM if you have a question, if you have if you're coming off of this, or if you feel like you're stuck on something and you'll never get off, and you just want to have you kind of somebody to talk to about that. I'm always available.
Awesome. And I just want to thank you, Jeff, for taking the time and jumping on the show and sharing with the audience. And also, it's been a pleasure to meet you. I love meeting guys like you that are doing next level things. And it's really nice to connect with you. And thanks for being on the show today, Jeff.
Likewise. Thanks for asking me.
Be well.
I want to thank you for listening to today's episode. And before you go on with your day, I have a quick favor to ask. If you enjoyed today's episode, I encourage you to subscribe to my email list, where you'll be the first to know when shows are released. You'll get the latest Healing Beyond Recovery updates on topics which include health and wellness, recovery, spirituality, consciousness, and more. Also, as a token of appreciation, when you sign up, you will receive my free holistic recovery guide. Discover 8 holistic principles to lose weight, create thriving relationships, and feel good in your body, all while staying sober. You can subscribe by clicking the free Holistic Recovery Guide link in the show notes or on my website at mikegovoni.com. Once again, thanks for listening, and remember, you can heal no matter what your story may be. Happy healing, and may you be well.